What is up, everybody? Carlos is hidden, but Midwestern Marx is here live and in person, except for Noah because he's super lame. But we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff today, answering questions, interacting with the chat, and all that good stuff, as well as responding to a recent recent article by Professor Daniel Tutt, a professor of philosophy, I believe, about the idea of MAGA communism that mentions us shortly and goes in depth about our comrades and American Communist Party members, Jackson Hinkle and Haz al-Din. So should be a good one today.
It's going to be a great one. I have two issues, though, off the bat. One, Carlos totally looks like he's photobombing you right now. Like he's like, whoop, popping in the background. But can we actually call him Professor Tutt anymore, or is his doctorate sort of your doctorate now?
Yes, that's a good question. I'll have to ask Haz. I know he did that with Professor Asatar Bear. His PhD actually got transferred directly to Haz, so I'll see if we can get something similar going on here.
I don't know the sort of bureaucracy of how that works is all. Right? Like, I don't know if it's after you write it or after he reads. Like, I don't know the order.
We'll figure it out.
It's
once
a done
we
deal.
Claim state power, we could just force it out of him.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right, we'll get started right after our intro, comrades. Which one?
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: "You look like a Russian, you look like a red. And if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard." Man, that song gets me going every time.
It does. We need to change this view. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know. Like, I really like this background, by the way, that Joe made a while ago for us.
Pretty sweet.
So I had the I don't know if I would say pleasure of reading Mr. Tutt. I guess we'll call him Mr. Tutt. Mr. Tutt's essay a while ago, and to just jump right off the bat and get into it. The title is so ridiculous to me. It's very subjective, and he never sort of qualifies it, right? Like something about loser politics. And I can't help but connect it to the same thing, CNN hit piece, right? That tried to portray the new communist movement in America as a bunch of, terminally online losers who live in their parents' basement and blah, blah, blah. I don't know why he would do such a thing, because it makes the rest of the entire essay less worthwhile, less serious, right? It makes me read it in the same vein as I read trolls on social media, right? Like, you can't take people seriously who have no reason for wild accusation.
Yeah, I didn't even respond to that part of the article. I didn't feel like it was very well defined. It did kind of just seem like an insult too, and I mean, I could have responded to it though, because you know, if you're making the claim that everybody who listens to Haas or Jackson is this you know, basement dweller incel or whatever, which he doesn't say explicitly, but that's kind of, you know, an overarching implication in the article. You know, as Marxists, we believe everybody can change, that everything is in a constant state of change. And what is the ACP doing right now? They're active in communities, they're organizing workplaces, they're going to strike lines. So, you know, as who was this? Aristotle, Socrates, or Plato, who said we are what we repeatedly do?
Aristotle.
So as Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. And if ACP is reaching a bunch of basement dwellers, that means we're taking them out of their mom's basements and sending them into the communities. Now, it's not true. That's not the case. It's actually shocking when you go to ACP events how many different jobs there are and professionals and people with all sorts of different skill sets and competencies in various fields. But even, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of people who follow Haas and Jackson and the ACP who are alienated and isolated and, you know, sort of suffering from learned helplessness. And, you know, what the ACP is for them on the individual level is a way to get involved, a tool to get active in their communities and to start changing this inherently alienating system. But I decided to focus on, in my response, different things, such as the theoretical arguments that I felt like he was straw manning and mischaracterizing. And then what was the other thing I focused on? On the way that liberal these people who demand that everyone who's interested in socialism needs to take liberal social positions, the same positions as Raytheon and Boeing, who now go to pride parades and wave rainbow flags to portray themselves as progressive, that those people inflame the culture war more than the people like us or like Haas, who are saying the culture war is a distraction, let's focus on class. So that's what I felt like was the most powerful argument against Tutt, but in his MAGA communism article. But yeah, there's a lot to deconstruct there.
Yeah, as far as the title, it was look, I don't know. He published his article at another site that wasn't just a Substack first. And I've heard in the past that there's places that just put a random title on your work, whatever's the most clickbaity. That could be the case if we give him the benefit of the doubt. It could not. You know, either way, he had to give the thumbs up somehow. And, you know, it's very strange to me that our organization is the one that in the heads of these leftists is tied to incels and people that are terminally online and NPCs and all these different symptoms of the internet age, because I think we've both been in the left for more than a decade now. We've had the pleasure of going through different groups, seeing the sociological dynamics of the sort of people that are in there. And I don't want to be rude, but it seems like the characterization that they seem to have of what the ACP members are is much more fitting for the left that the ACP grows out of critiquing, the left that ACP reconstitutes. When you go to ACP events, and look, they're open. A lot of them are open, you know, with the exception of the National Convention, which is for party people and some international delegates, but most of them are open. You're free to come and look at the sorts of people that are there. You'll find a lot of blue collar guys, a lot of working class people. And statistically, what our director of personnel, Cal Pettis, tells us is that something along the lines of high 70s to 80% of the party are blue collar workers. This is, you know, the sector of society that is as far as possible away from the terminally online sort of leftist stereotype. So It's an article that is rooted in so much ignorance as to what we are, and that's an ignorance that is not unintentional. It's not just that Tutt woke up one day and decided to not, to not investigate what it is that we are. There's been a deliberate attempt to tarnish the image of what the ACP is by forces that are both acting organically and by forces that are not acting organically, that are acting on behest of, at the behest of very nefarious interests who have been at the forefront of attacking communist organizations for the last century in the US, and who have created an image of what the ACP is supposed to be that is quite explicitly in contradiction to what it actually is. And this is what ideology is, guys. If we are Marxists, we accept that ideology takes the form of false consciousness and the the capitalist mode of life, and the form that the ideology that is developed on ACP takes is an inversion of what the ACP actually is, inverting the image of what ACP is in reality, because ACP is a working class party. It's what a communist party is supposed to be. It's an American party, so of course it understands it has a specific tradition that it is working out of, that it has to recognize and, tease the rational kernels out of. But what Tutt is operating with in this article is a clear form of false consciousness that accepts the ideological conception of what ACP is, which is quite literally an inversion of reality. And when people are like that, the only way to overcome that is to invite them. Look, see what it is that we're doing. Come to one of the Chicago Workers' School events. Come to any of the events that we're doing in person. If you are, wherever you live, go look at what the ACP is doing there locally. Now we have chapters all over the country. Come see what we're doing, and you'll see that in the flesh, we contradict the image that has been artificially manufactured about what we are in order to scare rational people away from an organization that is actually communist for the first time in decades in this country.
And we don't even just encourage people to come see what we're doing. Come see what we're doing and ask questions if you have them. Right? The last event that Eddie and I were at did, right? That Carlos was there too. There were people from a group that has nothing to do with ours asking very pointed questions who obviously didn't agree with us, and that was fine, right?
Happens every time.
Exactly. And we encourage that because why wouldn't we? Right. And here's the thing that I think a lot of what I call them the fake left, because, and I'll get into that. A lot of what the fake left does is they just project their own failures onto us. They need to have been right and sort of dismiss everything that isn't their dogma. So they believe everyone is like that, but it's just not the case. And when it comes to this specific issue, and Mr. Tutt's entire paper, right, is sort of framed in a way to attack the ACP and infrared for being culturally conservative, for saying X, Y, and Z in order to pander to conservatives. The only reason that's happening is because Mr. Tutt is culturally liberal, right? We didn't attack him. We've actually been very nice to him throughout our entire relationship with him. Or I wouldn't even say relationship, acquaintance with him when he began attacking us, right? We are always ready to live and let live. And so I want to make sure we frame this correctly. Everything that our side of this has ever said has been in defense, because where we're at, we don't need everyone to think what we think. We're happy for differences of opinion. We're happy for discussions, right? It is only this extreme rad-lib cultural liberalism that needs to force everyone to think what they think, or castigate them as some sort of dismissal term, like reactionary, even though it has nothing to do with reaction, or a phobe, or an ist, or whatever their slogan of the week is. And so I just find it sad when someone who seems like he's trying to provide a good faith critique just falls into the exact same thing as the rest of them.
Yeah, that's why I took friendly tone. I talked about this with Carlos, like the best way to go about it. And it's like, we want to, and I said this in like my tweets about it too. Like we like people actually articulating well thought out criticisms of us, so that we can respond like this and have a public debate about it. But that, as I said to Daniel Tutt, that's so rare. It's so rare that anybody actually thinks out their arguments and tries to find evidence for them and puts them on paper so that there can be a response. It's always like Noah just said, using some buzzword or some label. You're a reactionary, you're a patsock, or even those that literally make zero sense, like you're a Duganist or you're a LaRoucheite. That's the shit we've gotten so used to at this point. When there's an actual criticism, it's like, yay, finally, something legitimate we can actually respond to. So that's why I was, pretty praiseworthy of him for being better than a lot of the radlib trolls on Twitter, I guess. But yeah, then, as you dig into my response or dig into his article, you realize that he is still falling back on a lot of these like tropes and generalizations and incorrect implications about what infrared is, what Midwestern Marxism, what the ACP is. Like he to his credit, he does understand that the internet is important in an era of profilicity where, everybody's online and a lot of communication happens through social media. The internet is important. Originally the whole like gender pronoun, there are like 60 some genders, that type of ideology originated on Tumblr. And I remember back in the day, we never thought it would leave Tumblr. It was like a laughing stock. Yeah, that's what goes on over on Tumblr. But then, through the university system and through the popularization of that ideology online, it became a real thing. And it even became, one of the dominant ideologies of bourgeois society today. So these political movements sort of incubate online, and then they're concretized in the real world. And this is something that Daniel Tutt understands, which a lot of, more arrogant and ignorant academics are not understanding, and they just brush it off. The internet doesn't mean anything. The internet's not real, right? This is just completely boomer brained. We've seen time and time again that, real political movements that impact the real world and people's daily lives incubate online. Just look at the freaking Arab Spring, right? This is something the CIA and the ruling class understands extremely well, that the internet is a powerful tool. That's why they spend so much time doing social media censorship, and why they're trying to ban TikTok, and why the Zionist lobby has put, so much pressure on TikTok. They understand that social media matters, and this is something Tutt understands. But then he falls back to, just these guys are appealing to right-wing culture warriors, and that's why they say Starbucks baristas aren't productive. And I have to give him, for the 100th time in my life, the, actual analysis of what productive labor versus commercial labor is. And, explaining what Hazaldin's actual critiques of the Starbucks union are, because he didn't dig into that himself, and I get it. You fall into lies sometimes that are perpetrated online, but you'd think you would have dug harder for actual evidence to justify these, really harsh claims that he was making about Haas and Jackson. Like they take this barista position just to appeal to, some culture war sensibilities of conservatives. That's clearly not true. It's never been true. There are tweet threads on Haas's page and my page and Noah's page and the Midwestern Marx page explaining our actual position on unproductive versus productive labor. So that part was disappointing, and I said that explicitly in the article. Like, I expected more from him, a professor, someone who was taking the time to write out his arguments. I expected him to provide more evidence for his claims.
Yeah,
well, I don't know about professor anymore.
One of the
My
interesting
student. Sorry.
one of the interesting things, this whole phenomenon that Tutt's a part of, is that I spoke with Tutt. He interviewed me, I think, a little bit over a year ago, sometime after the Purity Fetish had came out. And for those that have been following us for a while, if you read that book, The Purity Fetish, it's basically our critique of the existing left, the framework through which it operates, and it postulates a few positive alternatives to that. And amongst which it's, look, we need a party that's rooted in the working class, not the PMC. And it needs to be rooted in the dialectical materialist worldview. And it needs to be constantly self-critical, rooted in actually, emphasizing results. And that's what the ACP is. But what's interesting is that when I spoke with Tutt, and it was at this theoretical level where we were still thinking about, what are the critiques we can make? So the negative component, what are the critiques we can make of the existing left? And how can we hypothetically think about an alternative? When it was at that level, everything was fine. Tutt was a big fan of the idea. I mean, till this day, there's clips that I've had people send to me where he employs the idea of the purity fetish, sometimes quite explicitly without referencing where it's coming from, which is a practice that others, including Rockhill, Emmanuel Ness, and quite a few others have taken to. And, there's others that I'm not going to name. But, it's interesting because you'll accept the ideas when they're at this hypothetical stage, but when they begin to become incarnated in the reality of a party, which is messy business, building a party isn't easy. It means having a situation where there's hundreds, if not thousands of people that you have to be held accountable for, and that there's so many different moving parts and stuff that's going on. It's not going to be pure. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be errors. There's going to be slip-ups. That's the whole point of the framework of the purity fetish. We can't expect purity and perfection. And what's interesting is that, they accept it at the theoretical level and they applaud it. But then when it comes to actually putting forth in practice everything that we have been thinking about and adding the positive component to the years of critiques that we have been refining together as a collective enterprise of thinking critically about these things, when it comes to that positive component, they reject it completely. And that's archetypical of Western Marxism. It's a lot of critique, but there's no positive affirmation. And what ends up happening to that abstract and form of negativity is that eventually, because there's no positive alternative that's tied to it, there has to be a positive, and the positive is a reassertion of that thing which you purport to critique. Since there's no positive alternative to that which is being critiqued, what ends up happening is that the spontaneous positive alternative ends up just being the thing that is being critiqued itself. So there's no, it's a form of compatible left. It's a left that's completely acceptable because it considers any alternative to be always worse than that which is being critiqued in the first place. It's a Thatcherite left where it's, where you have Tina, there's no alternative because any alternative is always condemned in this form. A more honest position would be someone who's like, and I've seen some of these people online, they're skeptical of ACP, but at least they're like, all right, let's give it a shot. Let's see where it goes. And they continue being constructively critical. That's perfectly fine. That's how leadership approaches certain things. We're not skeptical of our party. We have ultimate faith in it, but we have to be constantly constructively critical about what we're doing so that we can improve, so that we can grow more, and so that we can, bring home the results. But it's interesting that Tutt's a part of this whole phenomenon. And someone mentioned earlier, like the intellectuals that we used to be around with that are no longer here. It's the pity is theirs. It's not ours. They tell us that as if we're embarrassed. No, I feel pity for them, because what they don't recognize that has happened to them is that they have accepted something at the abstract theoretical level. They all endorse the purity fetish. They all use the concept of the purity fetish. They've written reviews about the purity fetish. They've worked with us and done panels and done a bunch of things. But then when we remove the purity fetish and act in a positive manner and construct the party and do what actually has to be done, that's when they leave. You want us to be embarrassed about that? No, we pity that, because that shows that they never actually understood the framework, or that they weren't serious enough to do the dirty work that's actually a part of positive construction and not just abstract theoretical criticism.
What it does is it shows you how powerful ideology is, because they agree with this on an abstract level, and it's the same for every one of these middle-class intellectual types. They talk a big game about this and that. Will talk to us about the purity fetish, about Marxism. All the problems with the left agree with us until it comes time to actually solve those problems, right? Because ideologically speaking, They're still enmeshed in that purity fetish. And why do they distance themselves from us? Why? The answer is their own cultural liberalism, their wokeism, their bourgeois ideology. That's the reason. They cannot be around a party that is 80% working class, because when it really comes down to the concrete working class as it exists, they hate it. They look down on it. They consider all of us a bunch of backwards reactionaries. And you know what? It's absurd, because again, when it comes time to meet the concrete, their abstract things that they're correct about are no longer there, right? They forget what the word reaction even means. And everything gets tossed into this world of dogma and cancel culture and wokeism, right? I think that this is why the ACP has made such a splash and none of their organizations are bothered. This is why, we get intense scrutiny over a tiny hurricane relief drive, right? And they get millions upon millions of dollars from other countries with no investigations whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know. I don't want to be overly tinfoil hat or suspicious, but we know the history in this country of COINTELPRO. We know the way our intelligence agencies work, and we know the way just regular sort of ruling class apparatchiks operate, right?
Yeah, I don't think Daniel Tutt's a Fed, but I think he might be falling for some arguments that are Fed boosted or Fed pushed, which is, shows why they spend so much time, fighting or doing ideological warfare, especially through social media. And I wanted to bring this up, what Elle said.
That's what I was getting at, by the way, Eddie. Sorry, Go ahead.
Nice. Good. Yeah, I said it better, though, of course.
Well, you are better than me.
Of course, and way smarter. But
and younger and better looking and funny. Yeah, we know.
Exactly. I had to highlight this and jump in real quick because this is exactly what I was going to say, what Elle here said. And thank you for all the super chats. We'll hit those in a sec. But it says the fear of cancellation must be addressed in this context. They are scared of the woke mobs ruining their academic careers. That's exactly what I had written down in my notes to say. They don't want to get attacked in the same way that we have. They don't want to risk their jobs in the same way that Carlos and I have. And, they don't want to face the same woke hate mobs that they themselves have contributed to, that they've seen us face. I mean, I was in a panel the other day with a professor, a Marxist professor, an academic, and I explained to him how I had lost my job under a massive emailing campaign demanding that I be fired for being a communist. He's like, well, nobody should have to lose their job for the left, or nobody needs to lose their job for the left. He was reassuring the kids, you could be a communist, a leftist, and still have a job as a professor like me. And it's like, bro, the reason they haven't come for your job is because you don't threaten power. The reason they haven't come for your job is because you're a liberal. The reason they haven't come for your job is because you haven't reached thousands and thousands of people with Marxist ideology and the Marxist worldview. That's why they come for our jobs. That's why they come for the ACP. And rather than seeing the ACP for what it is, a very exciting time, a return of communism in America in a concrete form and joining on with it, they come up with these mealy-mouthed, very low evidence criticisms and condemnation so that they can appease the woke mob and, appease their college administrators and make sure that their jobs are safe. And then they'll tell us on a panel, oh, nobody has to lose their job for the left. No bitch-ass liberals have to lose their job for the left because they help the ruling class. They are the establishment ideology. So it's definitely the concrete material conditions of these academics are something that needs to be addressed. They're terrified of being attacked or accused of anything.
And
it's genuflection to the ruling ideas. That's what it is.
Yep. And what's very interesting is that there's two things, right? A lot of these people, they'll develop quite good attacks on the PMC and so-called PMC Marxists. And what they'll do is that they'll work outside of the formal bourgeois academy. But what they end up replicating outside is almost like an external safe space that doesn't get you canceled within the bourgeois academy. So you can still work within the bourgeois academy because you've created the safe space outside that's not dirtied by this actual real work that these other people are sacrificing their jobs, their potential employment opportunities, everything, that their ability to ever come back to this bourgeois academy by doing. So it's not an actual counter-hegemonic structure. It's just like a mole that has been created outside of the body of the bourgeois academy because they feel more comfortable there. And that's not what building counter-hegemonic institutions is all about. If you're building counter-hegemonic institutions that, situate you in a way that's compatible to the existing bourgeois academy, they're not counter-hegemonic. They're a form of controlled counter-hegemony, as I've described in the past. Counter-hegemonic is us that are being canceled, not just by the bourgeois academy and by all of these spaces, but by the people that claim to be against that as well, through baseless and evidenceless claims. The other interesting thing that arises is, and perhaps here less with Tutt, who's critical and anti-China and anti-Russia, but for others that are in the sphere that in the networks that Tutt treads in, what's interesting is that when it comes down to the meat and potatoes of what they condemn about ACP, let's be blunt. It's the positions that Jackson and Haas have taken in the past explicitly about the LGBTQ movement. That's it. We do these Twitter spaces that you do with Haas. Dozens of people have came in, tell us your grievance. It's always the same thing. And the thing is, if that's how you feel, fine. But be consistent. Don't go working with Russia. Don't go working with China, who not only have the positions that have been enunciated by Haas and Hinkle, but who have the state power to enforce it.
And much harsher positions.
So be consistent. If you're going to draw the red line, not on imperialism, which is what they claim to say the red line is. Oh, the red line is imperial. No, but in your practice, the red line is LGBTQ issues. So if that's going to be your red line, be fucking consistent, dog. Have it be the red line in your relations with Russia, with China, and with the anti-imperialist world, which objectively, in terms of those questions of social morality, sides with the positions that Jackson and Haas have taken in the past. Be fucking consistent. If not, it's pure hypocritism. They're just hypocrites because they're okay when it benefits their profile. Oh, I'm working with this country and I'm working with that country and all this other stuff. But in their country, the people that are the most ideologically coherent in terms of those other countries and the most consistent, they condemn because they don't want to be tarnished by the American Academy as bigots or as transphobic or whatever the fuck. It's hypocritical and it's cowardly. You know what Aristotle used to say? Courage is the most important of virtue because you can have any other virtue, but if you don't have courage when it counts, you won't do it. And this is the cowardice of these people on full display, on full fucking display.
Oh, 100%. And here's what it always comes down to: when it's important, when it matters, this is their issue. This is what they care about. This is what makes them into anti-communists, turning against the Communist Party of their country, turning against the working class of their country, who overwhelmingly hate what they have to say on these issues. They hate getting scolded about it. They hate having the state teach their children gender ideology. They just do. So don't try to tell us you're for the working class because you're not. Don't try to tell us you're for communism because you're not. What you're for is bourgeois morality, right? And I think you should look up what Lenin had to say about those who what does he call it? Muck around in all things sexual, right? He calls it disgusting. And it's all right. We've gotten off the subject of Mr. Tutt now. But I want to say one more thing about this. One of the reasons it's so prevalent is because of the money in these special interest groups. Do you know how many millions of dollars are spent on these NGOs every year? How many activists have good careers making six figures to do this and send people after people, right? It's wild. So that, like, even if you're a normal person who really doesn't want anything to do with this, they will come after you even if you are just not canceling with them. The first time I personally got canceled was because I refused to cancel Infrared. It says years and years ago, before we'd ever met them, right? All of us were like, look, we don't know those guys. You know, like, they're fine doing their thing. We're fine doing our thing. We don't need to yell about them or listen to rumors on the internet. That's silly to us. We have important things to do. No, we're not going to cancel them with you. And that was the first time we got really attacked. And what was it on? Gender ideology. About things we never said just because we wouldn't join the cancel campaigns, right? So I don't know. Maybe that's where this all comes from for Mr. Tutt. Maybe he's afraid of them turning on him, and that's, you know, it is a reasonable fear to have. But if you have that fear, do not call yourself a Marxist. Do not call yourself a communist, because you do not deserve those labels.
There is also, I think, in Tutt's article and in general, an effort to divorce Infrared from Midwestern Marx, or divorce Infrared from the ACP, or just highlight one, which is, you know, Midwestern Marx doesn't get mentioned in Tutt's article till the very end. It mostly focuses on the personalities of Haas and Hinkle, which, you know, a lot of this is rooted in individualism as well, bourgeois moralism and individualism, making these moral condemnations of individuals rather than looking at the party as what it is, you know, as a whole. The program and the Constitution don't say anything about gender ideology or whatever, but they don't want to make a critique of the party as it actually exists concretely in the real world. They would rather make a critique of Haas and Jackson and everything they've ever said on Twitch or Kick over the last 3 years, even years before, you know, we even had a party. And, you know, I think the reason why they don't mention Midwestern Marx until the end is because we have had, you know, a softer approach on these issues. We haven't said as brash of things like for comedic effect or whatever else. So in order to criticize the party, they have to divorce us from them. They don't want to talk about how, you know, us who have tended to be more socially progressive in the past, or progressive, socially left-wing in the past, have, you know, put those culture war issues aside to forge our audiences together with Infrared and form an organization that's focused on class struggle. All right, they don't want to acknowledge the Midwestern Marx role in forming the ACP. They want to isolate not just Jackson and Haas, but the worst, or not even the worst things, but the most provocative things that Jackson and Haas have ever said, while, you know, downplaying the role of Midwestern Marx to try and demonize the ACP. And it would be much more valuable, I think, to see a critique of the ACP party program. I don't think I've seen one of those yet. A critique of, you know, the party as it actually exists concretely in the real world, not this delusion you've made up in your head where every one of our members is some basement dweller, somebody living in their mom's basement, you know, watching Haas's streams, and you know, worshiping a shrine of him at night. That your critique has been completely made up in your own head. And there are, you know, we've been very clear about what our positions are, what our activities are. You know, what do you have against the ACP cleaning communities, organizing workplaces, going to strike lines? What do you have against the 18-point program and everything we lay out there? You know, they don't have anything. They just, all they can do is isolate the most controversial things that Jackson and Haas have said completely from their context, and then use that to say this is all that the ACP is.
It's laughable. You know why? Because it's so untrue. Like, we sit here knowing what's going on inside, and the level of contrast between what someone like Tutt and other haters of the ACP are saying and what's actually going on, it's such a gap that is laughable. You know, that's if we take it back to Greek comedies, part of what made comedies was that gap between what it says it is and what it actually is. Here we have something similar. This is what they say they are, and this is what we actually are. And it's such a, there's such a space between that that it's laughable. It's funny to talk about our members, blue collar guys. I mean, I've had meetings with the chapter executives where there's been 4 or 5 people with railroad helmets on, or steel helmets on, or mine workers helmets on, just zooming in. Some of these people are in my classes. We have people like JK. He's taken all of my classes. He's in class in the middle of his fucking work. It's so insane how these people have a warped conception, a completely topsy-turvy conception of what's going on. And it's pure bourgeois ideology. It's turning things on its head. It's looking at things in a completely backwards and upside down manner. And again, as I said earlier, like the only way to really defeat that, if they're genuine about this, because if they're opportunists, there's no way. If all they're concerned about is not getting canceled by the leftist hordes, that's not, they'll never be here. But if they're actually genuine about the struggle, if they feel concerned for the world that we live in, if they're concerned about their kids and the world that they're going to inherit, and they actually want to fight, it's their duty to at least engage at a more concrete level of investigation, because all that they have shown us is abstract thinking, anti-dialectical thinking, the purity fetish. That's all that they've shown us. Because what form of thinking is it when you take certain statements synecdochally that 2 people have made, you abstract them from the context that they were produced in, because 99% of them were like joking, ball-busting, locker room jokes, which you can say, okay, they're distasteful for my sense of comedy, but that's part of the context that has to be understood. What form of thinking are you participating in when you take these semblances of things, you abstract it from its context, and then you pass on that basis judgment on the whole of an organization? It's abstract thinking. It's anti-dialectical thinking. So it's absurd. I would ask these people, do a little bit of self-critique. We do a lot of self-critique here at the ACP and in the Midwestern Marxist Institute all the fucking time. Have the humility to do a little bit of self-critique and realize that what you have produced in terms of your thinking related to the ACP is just pure nonsense. It's abstract thinking. It's anti-Marxist nonsense.
And you know what's funny? The perfect example of how this happens is Carlos uses this phrase to refer to this all the time: locker room jokes, right? And I've seen them come after Carlos for saying the phrase locker room talk, right? Like, oh, you're secretly a conservative because Trump used that phrase. So basically what they do is they take this word out of the context it's used in, pull it into the abstract, define it from there, right? This word only means exactly what Donald Trump meant, and everyone who uses this word means it how Donald Trump did, and then you put it back and superimpose it into this context with this new context around it where it doesn't belong. I call that process definition mongering, by the way.
Yep.
Right? It's redefining from the abstract and your own subjective, historically determined view of a word. But it's wild to me that even as we're talking about this problem, they're embodying this problem in order to dismiss whatever it is you're saying by randomly picking a word choice and acting as if this is proof of something, right? And this is what gets to me about Mr. Tutt's paper, too. There isn't an actual reason for anything he's saying. Like any of his actual positive claims, and I have one pulled up, I'll read to you guys. There's no reason, and there's no way he could even possibly have a reason, because even the ability to get one would imply that he can read minds and he's a wizard. And you guys know my opinions on wizards.
It always comes back to wizards.
It always does, right? He says, most detrimentally, this culture war pandering to the right leads infrared to adopt a narrow empirical definition of what constitutes the working class, leading them to deny, for example, that service workers or baristas are part of the proletariat. He doesn't give us any quotes to back this up. Not a single one. You know why? Because they're not there. Haas has never said such a thing. Haas has never said, oh, I got to pander to the right, guys. So let's call baristas non-productive labor. Like, conservatives care what productive labor is. You know what I mean? Like, it's wild to me that not only is it nonsensical, but it implies he's read his mind. I don't know. And it's like, we've gone over this issue of what productive labor is and what unproductive labor is
so many times.
What I mean, dozens, if not hundreds. And it's like, if you don't understand the MCM circuit, you can't understand industrial capitalism. Therefore, you can't understand monopolization and financialization.
That's why Marx starts with it. Even though it's hard for people to grasp in chapter 1. That's why he starts with it.
And then what does he do? He goes to the contradiction within the commodity, right? Value. And he breaks that into the bits that have to lead it into its realization, right?
Oh, here we go. Noah's going to explain all of volume 1.
Right. Well, here we go. But he goes through like this process of this step has to lead to this next one, which makes this next step look like this, which makes that step, and on and on and on and on and on, right? This is how you have to understand everything if you're viewing the world through Marxism, right? But this isn't what Mr. Tutt is doing when he wants to call baristas the proletariat. He clearly doesn't understand how Marx has talked about the proletariat coming into being and what it means. Like, the proletariat isn't the proletariat because it's exploited. It's not the proletariat because it does wage labor. It's the proletariat because it is a specific section of society that is in contradiction with another for the exact way society has to reproduce itself in a given epoch.
And you know, you mentioned the fact that he doesn't have arguments, and that's true. And look, I could say it's a general trend in our society that people don't know how to formulate arguments. That was definitely one of the things that the Twitter Spaces showed. But do you really have to formulate arguments when you understand that the audience that you're speaking to is working from the same presumptions as you are? You don't have to substantiate things when people already accept as given the stuff that you're saying. And what is that if not ideology? I can reference a thinker that Tutt appreciates very much, that I do as well to a certain extent in a more critical manner, and that I know that both you know and Eddie hate, Slavoj Žižek. You know, there's different ways of knowing. There's the things that we don't, that we know. There's the things that we know we don't know. There's the things we don't know. And there's the things we don't know that we know. Those things that we don't know that we know, those are the presumptions that we operate with that shape our perception of the world, that shape how it is, that mediate how we pass judgments upon the world. And those unknown knowns are ideology. And you don't have to provide evidence when you're working on that basis, because you understand also that the audience you're speaking to is working on that basis as well. They have the same ideology. They have the same baseless presuppositions about the thing that you are examining.
Yeah, you guys are making outstanding points here. I think the only thing I have to add really is somebody said, you know, how important is the productive labor debate? It seems like minutia, and I get why you could think that, you know, and you know, there are some of these old debates about Marxism that are very complicated. You know, these are the question of productive labor has been a debate within Marxism for a long time. I've never heard the argument that those who think baristas are unproductive are just pandering to conservative culture warriors. But this has been a debate for a very long time. And it's a complicated debate, but there are very real implications, not just for how you construct an economy after socialism. You need to have a clear understanding of every different sector and what's productive and what's not. But you also, in terms of strategy organizing under capitalism, because if there's a rail strike, that's going to have very different effects than, say, a barista strike. That doesn't mean we're against baristas being in the ACP or organizing industrial unions. We'd prefer they organize industrial unions over craft unions, which I also explain in the article, which is Haas's other critique of the Starbucks union, which is very fair and which I agree with 100%.
It's basic Leninism.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's basic Walter Reuther in the UAW. A lot of these debates have been settled a long time ago. But anyways, productive labor has much more power over the economy. This is why Joe Biden hasn't really said anything about the Starbucks union or hasn't freaked out about it, but he broke the rail strike because a rail strike has the power to shut down the whole American economy. So if you get those people organized and militant and in a communist party, they have extreme power. They have the power to shut down the whole economy. So the debate over what's productive and unproductive labor and who we aim our rhetoric at and who we craft our program for is a very important question. Like I said, that's no hate to Starbucks workers. We'd like to see, them have opportunities to pursue other things, intellectual pursuits or more productive employment, and use AI to automate a lot of those demeaning and alienating jobs, like demeaning unproductive jobs, commercial labor jobs away. We don't need a million insurance salesmen, right? We can just get rid of a lot of these unproductive commercial jobs. But that doesn't mean we're against the people in those jobs. No, go to acp.us right now. Join up with us. We have nothing against you. Before you go, Noah, I just want to say thank you, everyone, so much for the super chats. David, Happy New Year, my friend. Al, thank you so much. Google where the word woke increases in keywords in the mid-2010s. Extremely interesting there. Also frustrating that Bernie, AOC, and Hassan Piker accuse us of being online parasocial when that's how they built their platforms, is through being online parasocial. So thank you very much. Thank you for the super chats, everyone. If you want to support the Institute, super chats are great. We appreciate that. But patreon.com/MidwesternMarks takes the least percentage of your money. It's the most efficient way to fund the Institute. Plus, you get Carlos's book, The Purity Fetish, which is worth way more than the $10 that you'll pay for it. So,
at the end of the day, and here's my theory about this. I have three things I got to say about this. The reason they get so upset about saying, look, I'm sorry, but baristas are not part of the industrial proletariat is because they want to feel special. They want to be that exploited revolutionary agent. And when you tell them they're not, this is part of their identity, right? All of this is how people build individual identities these days. They're not a communist because they actually believe in class struggle. They're a communist because it's a way to join a subculture. And that's a problem that we are trying very, very, very hard to get over, right? That's number one. It's a middle-class individualism that says, but I'm special when I think of myself as proletarian, right? And sorry, you're just not. But number two, what they are, for the most part, is part of this process of reproletarianization that I talk about. And stuck in this limbo where financialization has caused value and exchange value to go so far away from each other, right? That like what they do as far as a job doesn't even matter. It's their relationship with finance that matters. And they can begin to sort of organize in new ways to fight back against financialization and bring production back in a sort of decentralized manner. But that's a whole nother bag of bananas we don't got time for. Number three is, oh crap, I completely forgot what it was.
Oh, you should have wrote down number three.
I did, but I have like all my notes are like, I need to turn the page on my notebook. Anyway, it was something about the purity fetish.
Yo, is this the real JFK?
Probably.
Yo, what's up? Welcome back to Earth. Yeah, I kind of got distracted there, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like people are gonna look back one day and not understand why all these people didn't join up with the ACP sooner. And some of them might glom on, and what they're not understanding is the conditions that existed before ACP. What'll be hard to understand looking back historically is like the culture that's been created on the left by Operation Chaos and COINTELPRO. That's why, like, what Noah was saying earlier is so true, or what me and him were saying together. We don't think that Daniel Tutt is any kind of Fed, but the environment that allowed something like this to be published and catch on is a Fed influenced environment 100%. And even the way that the academy works, where you're liable to get fired if you're doing organizing and other things like this. I feel like in the future, people will have a hard time looking back and understanding that and understanding why, people were taking the positions that they did and why, they were calling ACP fascist and all these things as we're like cleaning up neighborhoods and going to strikes and educating people and having them read the classics of Marxism in a systematic manner. But that's the situation we're in today. People think that is fascism.
That's straight up Mussolini, Eddie. What are you talking about?
Mussolini
made everyone in the fascist party read Lenin.
It's very interesting because I think I've said this before on stream, but it's kind of like it's kind of like what Parenti says U.S. propaganda was like in terms of how it spoke about the Soviet Union. When there were no protests, it was criticized because it was an authoritarian regime that didn't allow protests. When there were protests, it was criticized because supposedly the protests signified the fact that it was an authoritarian regime that didn't respect its people's rights, and therefore they had to protest. Anything they did, there was always a way, because you had already the presumptions, the unknown knowns there, to spin it in a negative light. And that's what's been done to ACP. Everything we do, it's always spun in a negative light. If we don't do community service, it's because Haas hates the homeless and thinks they're landlords or something. Which, guys, if you read that and do not understand that that's a joke, it might not be your type of humor. It might not be a good type of, but it's a joke. It's a joke. But if we do that, then it's because we have some sinister plot, and it's always, anything we do, it's always spun in a way to make it a sinister thing. And when that's when that's the treatment that an organization gets, you always have to think critically. Why is it that the institutions of the ruling class allow people that never go viral, sometimes people that don't even have followers, to have the post on this organization where they're smearing them? Why is it that it's those posts that go viral? It's very rare that I see a Tutt post that blows up, and he's got many great things that he posts, but why is it that it's this one that has gotten so much traction? That's very strange. It's interesting how, for them, a phenomenon like Jackson Hinkle is evidence of the fact that he's carrying favors for the State Department or whatever the hell they might think, or that he's a Fed. It's very interesting how the guy that gets banned from every major app, that gets banned even from dating sites, that gets banned from PayPal, that gets banned from everywhere except the sites that are created precisely for the sake of free speech, and from Twitter, where you have a phenomenon where Musk has, created, he has curated a profile of being the free speech guy, and therefore he can't censor the people who are too big to censor. That's that phrase from Obama, they're too big to fail. It's the same thing. Jackson had a meteoric growth on X, and he became too big to censor. If Jackson was censored by Musk, it would directly tarnish his profile as someone that is free speech. He can censor smaller people who, no one will throw a fuss about, but he can't censor someone like Jackson. Instead of understanding that objectively, somehow the guy that's been censored by everyone, that's been attacked, that had Colombian mercenaries sent to his hotel by the Zionists when he was in Venezuela, the guy that's on kill list for the Ukrainian fascist state, somehow that guy is a Fed. But all these other people who have shit that never goes viral, who never get attacked by any of the institutions of the ruling order, and who have their stuff go viral only when they attack us, somehow they're okay, but we're the ones that are Feds. It's turning the world completely on its head. And if you don't see this as a manifestation of bourgeois ideology, you're missing the whole point of what it is.
It's wild to me because they at the same time call us FBI agents, Russian intelligence agents, and Chinese intelligence agents. We're getting paid by Putin and Xi Jinping and Joe Biden,
I wish.
right? And here's the thing. The problem is people don't understand how the deep state works. They don't understand how the CIA and FBI actually work, right? My wife was just listening to a podcast earlier, and she was telling me about it, about how the CIA was involved in writing music for the Scorpions in service of the Cold War, right?
Changes.
That is the kind of stuff they do. They have people working at all of the media companies. They have people at Google. They have people at all of these things. They think that like people are feds and the feds have something on them and they're pulling strings and they're actually lying and don't believe what they're saying. That's not how the feds operate. The feds are not puppeteers. They are theater construction people. They build and own theaters, and they control what goes on in those theaters. The puppets come of their own accord and go into the theaters. They're just filtered in a way so that the owners of those theaters decide who goes in them. That's what it is. And sometimes they'll coach the puppets, right? Like with the Scorpions or the Grateful Dead or the Call of Duty video games or a billion different movies, right? Like that's what they do. I mean, there have been multiple whistleblowers who have said the main job of the CIA is lying to the American people.
Absolutely, and they're not supposed to function domestically, which is hilarious. But if you read Michael Parenti's Make Believe Media, it's a little bit outdated because it was written in the 90s, you know, but it shows how like every major film is basically crafted with military oversight, and every studio has a censorship board that doesn't allow certain things through. That's why movies like Spartacus or Voces Inocentes had to be published independently and then blew up, you know, because they were extremely poignant movies that got to something real that people feel, but Hollywood wouldn't let them be published. Carlos and I have to get going here very soon because I have to drop him off somewhere before I have wrestling practice. But I did want to respond to this from Marius because I think it's a good point, really good point, that sums up a lot of what we've been talking about here. He says, honestly, it's because you don't kowtow to the identity politics cult, especially the LGBT stuff, which is a loyalty oath to the Democratic Party. All the other stuff is simply cover for that. That term loyalty oath is exactly what it is. And that gets back to what Carlos was saying. For a lot of these academics who say that imperialism is their red line, it's not. You know, the LGBTQ stuff is their red line, which is, you know, the same red line of the Democratic Party, or that's how you signal that, you know, you prefer that you don't see the two-party system as a duopoly run by the capitalist class, but you see the Democrats as being superior. You see the Democrats as being better. You see the Democrats as being on the right side in these culture wars. You see Raytheon and Boeing and all these weapons manufacturers who show up to pride parades as being correct on these issues. And if you violate that, then you're not allowed in the movement. If you're an anti-imperialist who has criticisms of the LGBTQ movement, that's too bad, you know, and it's a failure to put their, you know, actual theory into practice, because as Carlos was saying earlier, they claim imperialism is their red line. But then when there's an anti-imperialist party that won't kowtow to the Democrat or the LGBTQ stuff, that won't take the loyalty oath of the Democratic Party, they condemn it.
And all that does is just prove they're nothing but liberals. Because that's what matters when something matters.
Damn right.
If I can just say something to wrap up.
Nope.
You liberal.
You know, it's what's the saddest part of it is that the way they phrase the party in relationship to these things, you would think that there's like part of the program, it's like persecute all of these. No, like the program, it's just tolerance. Like, just be tolerant. Don't force stuff upon other people. Just be tolerant. And that means you have to be tolerant of the people that identify like that. And you also have to be tolerant of the people that for religious, cultural, whatever reasons, do not identify with that perhaps feel uncomfortable with some of that stuff being told to their 7-year-olds or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's what genuine tolerance is. And that's supposed to be a progressive, bourgeois, liberal value. But none of these people seem to catch on to that. And by practicing a very stringent form of intolerance, what they're acting is in a more, to use the liberal paradigm, authoritarian but fascistic way of being. And ultimately, it's drawing that line on the question of identity, on the question of the LGBTQ stuff, and not on the more principal questions of imperialism and the class struggle itself, which there's people in both communities that are LGBTQ and that are more conservative who are willing to put things aside to focus on class. And that's the position of our party. That's the position that these people like Tutt, claim to have, but in reality don't. They just end up falling into the loyalty oath that Marius was talking about. But before I go, for those that are interested, I'm doing part 2 of my Marxism-Leninism class. You can sign up to it through the Midwestern Marx Selfie. It's a class is going to cover the works of Stalin, Mao, and many others. And it's going to be very special. I can assure you that the students' experience from the first class has been very positive. And yeah, sign up for it while you can. There's limited seats, and I'll link now the class to the chat. Just look up Midwestern Marx Selfie, and it should pop up.
Okay, yeah, Midwestern Marx Selfie, Selfie for Carlos's, and then if you want his book, The Purity Fetish, and to support us without having a bunch of your money taken by TikTok or YouTube or whatever. So here's the Selfie. Check that out for Carlos. I'll put a link here real quick in the chat for everybody. Make sure it goes to all destinations. So that's Carlos's class. Going to be really fantastic. Here is the Midwestern Marx Patreon, the most efficient way to support us without having, like I said, YouTube or TikTok or X or whoever the hell else taking your money.
Yep.
If you can't support us financially, be sure to like and share the stream and comment. We understand that everyone's in a different financial situation, but sharing and liking and all that stuff helps more than you could possibly imagine, helps us break through an algorithm which is designed, of course, to suppress revolutionary content like ours. Thank you to all the super chatters today. We got an extra one from Lawn Guy 1990. Thank you so much, comrade, making the very strong argument that Hassan Piker and others have called Jackson a Fed when he's met with Russian government officials and Maduro and people who are opposed to the U.S. federal government. So, yeah, it's quite ridiculous. Couldn't agree more, Lawn Guy. Thank you. And Battle Cossack, constant super chatter. Our brother from Argentina, I believe, great comrade, always helping us out. It says, when will you guys do a reaction to anti-communist history video again? I recommend the ones from Alternative History Hub. Oh yeah, send them in the Discord recommended channel if you can, and I'll get around to. I want to start doing more videos like that eventually because they do well in terms of views. So I'll be back on that soon.
And boost the article. Let the same amount of eyes that saw Tutt's. How can I phrase it in a nice manner? Tutt's misinterpretation of the ACP and Jackson and Haas and Infrared. Let the same amount of eyes see our response. Give us at least the opportunity to make it a counter argument, and the only way you could do that is by boosting it, by liking, by commenting, by sharing it, by resharing it periodically. Give us the opportunity to make the counter argument to what's very effectively boosted smear job on our organization that's absolutely baseless. But anyways, we got to go. It's been a pleasure.
One last thing before we go. If you're in the party and you need new ones of these awesome hats that you see the three of us wearing right now, get a hold of me through Telegram and we will get them out to you. That's it. Have a great night, everybody.
Hell yeah. Someone's got to hit the outro.
I got it.
You're the man.
Well, I'm the something.
See you, everyone.
Peace out.
Bye, everybody.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. freedom is merely privilege extended and less enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the